language by the people, of the people, for the people. But the people are retarded.
So we established a new civil rights cause of action for those whose intimate images were shared on the public screen. How many times have you heard, I'll bet everybody knows somebody somewhere along the line, that in an intimate relationship, what happened was the guy takes a revealing picture of his naked friend or whatever in a compromising position, and then literally, in a sense, blackmails or mortifies that person. Sends it out, put it on.
Now the Ukraine, and St. Patrick's name is now Zelensky.
Refuse to go along with this, and I'm seeing through all of your lies, Barack Obama, you wicked, wicked devil!
I already had AmericaShirts laughing off of the Zelensky thing, so I was just like, all right, we'll just go right into it. Welcome back to another night of Stick with Koolfrogg. As you can see, it says that we're actually going to do an Ian from Timcast was right. We're going to do something on some laser-induced graphene. We brought in our resident professional graphene expert.
What they mean is they found a drunk guy talking shit on the internet.
Welcome back, Mike Hunt. So, really, like I told him, I said, I really don't know anything about laser-induced graphene. What is laser-induced graphene?
Well, it's graphene induced by a laser, as the name might have suggested.
Well, can you go into a little bit more depth for me? Because I have, like, no questions, because I have no clue what it is.
So we need to take a step back, right? What is graphene? Graphene is a form of carbon. Diamond is the other carbon one. But it's the one that you tend to see used for electronics and also in pencil lead. And so laser-induced graphene is a way to get the kind you use for electronics with a laser. Which you could imagine you might want, because a laser is a very sort of fine tool, and you can get very fine details in your electronics by sort of generating it with the laser.
Okay. So it's not that I'm like totally, ignorant to the use of a laser. I actually used a laser. I worked at a place in my hometown where I actually cut out keychains or magnets or whatever. These it was an acrylic that would, like, 1/8 inch, and would throw a blue laser at it, and it would actually cut through the piece or whatever, and it'd like give us a nice clean edge if we tip that laser just right, and it would sit somewhere about 1/4 inch away from the product, and it would throw that light through into this bed that was covered in, we would use like grill paint, because it was black, and it would actually wouldn't reflect that laser back out, into our eye or anything else. It was fun. Would we have been able to actually create this graphene with those?
Yes.
Oh, see, that's fun.
I've done things with lasers before, like
Yep.
like you shoot people with the laser gun, and you blast the like Star Wars Battlefront 2, and the third one, and there's KOTOR. That was a pretty good game, but other than that, I don't really have that much experience with lasers other than those. Although I would say I was pretty proficient in the Battlefront games with those lasers. I will say that.
So this uses a standard laser etcher. I actually pulled up a video of it.
Oh, okay,
My
okay.
computer is too potato to stream.
Oh, so which one was that you?
If
Did you threw a
go
whole
to-
ton of them in my
Yep.
in my Discord.
It is the one labeled CNC 3018 Pro Laser Engraver. It shows the one that I've been experimenting with. And then there's another
Is
one
that the one
called-
that you threw in my general?
Mm-mm. Sorry, it's a in-stick show setup.
Oh, no, okay. Just being sure where we're looking here. So then,
I figured I'd give people who are less familiar with it a chance to just see what one of these machines looks like.
what was the name on this one?
CNC 3018 Pro Laser Engraver.
CNC 18 Pro Router DIY.
I can throw it
Okay.
here in private chat if you need me to.
I think just a 4-minute little. Yeah, I got one here.
Does
I just
it
had to-
work
I just
kind
had to
of like a
scroll through it.
lightsaber? And you like drill it in and like you
No.
you, like make it, no.
This
Oh,
isn't. No,
well.
this is actual. Legit.
Oh well.
Yeah, this is
Thought-
a
I
real
thought I'd
thing,
ask.
Shirts. As much as I would love for me to just like sit there with a lightsaber carving wood, because that is my fantasy job, right? Just my flannel and like laser knife out there making art. This is somewhat more computerized and somewhat less exciting.
Damn. Well, okay.
It's coming. It's coming. Here it is. Okay, so this is just a little 4-minute, 29-second video. I need to separate my screens here.
Looks fine to me.
No, it's just on my side of it.
Whoa.
A little loud, maybe?
Little.
Yeah, you should nudge that down. This is a $200 CNC you can get off the internet together with a $100 laser modification. Just for people who want to get started themselves.
Yeah, why don't you mute the music so we can hear him we'll talk about it.
Is that all it is? Is just music throughout the whole thing?
Yeah, there's nothing
Okay.
important
Okay.
here.
I just wanted to make sure he didn't say anything that was.
Nope. So this is basically one of the starter machines you can get. It's a do-it-yourself kit for about $200 off of the relevant website, and then you need the $100 laser upgrade to do this kind of laser work instead of traditional machining.
How much is the machine?
The like platform and all of that is $200.
Oh, and then it's just $100 for laser modification, so altogether
Yeah,
it's $300.
so that little black box is $100 more. Just to
The little one that he's got in his hand right there.
no, the one he switched it to. So
Yeah, in that-
everything
in that handle
but
thing.
that, yeah,
Okay.
the laser itself is $100.
The laser itself was only 100.
And so, like, what? You hook it up to your computer and you tell it what to do?
Yep.
Neat.
And so
Does
you
it have
can
like a
imagine-
program you download, or?
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of them. This takes Gerbil format, which is a standard sort of control for this kind of machine. There's a bunch of open source ones, which is what I use. And so you can imagine how you can sort of etch a circuit into it the same way that he's etching art. It
Okay.
turns out if you pass over the right way with the laser, those black lines are actually a form of graphene.
Oh, sure. Okay.
So then, what would you do if I'm jumping
that's
ahead?
interesting.
Tell me I'm jumping ahead, but like, what would you do then? Okay, you put the graphene there. Let's say you make like a circuitry, whatever. What do you do with that then? Do you take it off the wood, or do you just use the wood itself?
Well, so most of the people doing this use a form of plastic, and there's a good video on that called Capped-on Tape Superconductor, where someone uses essentially
got
the
that
same
so
laser
hot.
module to
I suppose he's
super
trying to etch,
capacitor.
isn't he? I'm thinking of he's like trying to cut something out. It's still, it seems like he's running it so hot.
Yeah, it's very.
Like, you know, like I said, I'm not stupid when it comes to the use of a laser. I've actually used one for a good 7 years. I used it until I smarted off to the engineer and told him that he was stupid for using stupid numbers.
He probably was being stupid.
No, he was, because he was like he like told me to reduce something by a 100,000 10,000ths, and I'm like, dude, just remove all those zeros. It's the same thing. He's like, what? I'm like, you don't need all the zeros after the one. Just take them away. It's the same number, dude. He's like,
Oh, jeez.
what do you mean? And I had to actually explain it to him like 10 different times for him to get it. And he's like, why don't you just do what I asked you to do? And I'm like, just trying to make your job easier, bro.
I've known enough machinists that I've learned my lesson on silly requirements. I put as few as I ever can in a design and just assume that the machinist will have some idea of what's happening.
Right? Right. No, I mean, he's just one of those that like to stand over you and like, oh, I want to know what you're doing and how to do it. And it's like, no, that's my job. You're just the engineer. You just stand there and you know, come up with something for me to actually do. You're like, don't tell me.
I mean,
how to
I
run
like
my
to
shit. I know how to run
understand
it.
to the degree that I like understand tool radius is important on a CNC mill because your corners and the radius of your tool have to agree or it's just all bad times.
Yeah. And that's pretty much what got me the job is previously to that I worked at, which is an international company of Fastenal. I worked at, and I did the same thing with, you know, CNC machines or whatever. So it's like computer aided stuff is fun and easy.
Yeah, they're just CNC for $200. And so, what you would do then is like use that and like etch out that, but it turns into graphene. And then
So
what
all the
with
black
graphene
stuff that was around it is
circuitry
pretty much what he's looking at.
Yeah.
So you use a slightly different pattern than when you do cutting, and you use a couple of passes. The first pass essentially turns the wood into carbon, and then the next pass, because it's already carbon, essentially gets that carbon to link together, and that starts to form graphene. And then you need one more for some reason that I don't quite understand, but
I mean,
essentially
not
you
trying to
structure it
dox
with
the company
laser.
that I work for, but I mean, so it was, we took and we made sports memorabilia, whatever. So there was a clock that we would actually make that would actually be cut out of wood, and we would take and we'd laser cut them, and after we were done, because it would leave a soot, we would actually wipe all that away with a rag or whatever. So that was all graphene is basically is what it's coming down to. And that stuff could have been kept and stored and used.
Yep.
That's fun.
And so one of the uses is a standard sort of plastic they use in semiconductor manufacturing called Kapton. Also does this. And so that's where a lot of the research is, right? Turning this sort of film stuff into flexible circuits. But you can do the same thing with wood.
So is there something that we can actually show that that shows how to make the flexible circuits?
Yes, it is this other link I had. Okay. Kapton tape supercapacitor.
That for the moment.
So how would you take it off the wood? Like, does it just come off the wood because it's graphene? Does it separate?
It does not come off the wood.
Oh. Well, then how do you use it?
Okay. Oh, this is the one that you had in general. I kind of listened to this one for a little bit just because I'm like, oh, I got to at least listen to something. I listened to this one, and then I listened to one of the other ones, like another guy that was talking. It looks like it was an hour long or something.
Yep, the hour-long one should probably be put in the description because it is somewhat more informative for the scientifically minded, but it's definitely a commitment to watch.
Oh, okay, cool. Sorry, I'm trying to get there. This is slowly. Even my somewhat performance-minded computer is freaking lagging because there's so many videos. There it is. I think I have too many links open or something. I hear you. All right. So this guy. Oh, I gotta.
Hey, It
might not look like much, but this little piece of tape on a glass slide has 156 microfarads of capacitance. You can take this idea and you can scale it up to very large specimens, or you can
Now, what's a
scale it out into
microfarad?
different architectures to get different voltages and capacitance. This is
A farad is the unit of capacitance. A microfarad is 1/1,000,000th of 1 farad.
So that's just the measurement of to what extent this particular thing or whatever can conduct electricity?
Correct.
Okay.
Or store electricity. It's capacitance. So
Yeah.
what a capacitor does, right, is store charge and then release it.
Okay.
This is all done using easily available tools, namely a cheap 405 nanometer laser and a roll of Kapton tape. And that's
Like
it.
the laser we saw before.
So today we'll talk about
and
what's going on
Kapton
here,
tape is
how
in
this
every
process
electronics
works,
lab in the
and
US.
just have some fun with super caps. So at the heart of this little supercapacitor is graphene, which is maybe not a surprise because we're repeatedly told that graphene is going to save the world and revolutionize society because it has a lot of really interesting properties.
And
It
colonize
shows
your
promise
body.
in everything
Allegedly.
from solar panels to thermal compounds, energy storage to MEM resistors. Like, graphene is going to change the world, probably someday. But the difficulty is scaling up these graphene processes.
I know,
So
we're
it's
talking about that.
easy enough to make monolayer graphene just using a piece of Scotch tape or tossing some graphite in a blender. And that gets you really good high quality graphene, but it gives you very small pieces. And the difficulty is scaling that up so you can have a whole solar panel's worth of single monolayer graphene. But that's not what we're doing here.
Ooh.
Instead, the type of graphene that we're creating is known as laser-induced graphene. As you might guess from the title, this involves taking a laser. In this case, we're using a simple 4 or 5 nanometer off-the-shelf laser. It's about 5 watts. But really, almost any type of laser works for this application. And we're irradiating Kapton, or polyimide. In 2014, researchers found that Kapton, when hit with a laser, will decompose into a graphitic substance. And upon further investigation, this graphitic carbon-based substance was actually a type of graphene, laser-induced graphene. And it forms a kind of a foamy structure where the laser hits the Kapton and it bubbles up into an airy, foamy carbon mess. This is very different from the monolayer graphene that you typically hear about, and it has some interesting properties relative to the monolayer. It's not nearly as conductive, which is a shame, but on the other hand, it has much higher surface area because of its foam nature, and that lends itself to being used in catalytic reactions or capacitors, because you ideally want a large surface area to interact with the electrolyte. This process is remarkably simple. Various polymers will decompose into graphene, but most of them require a blanket of nitrogen or other inert gas to kind of keep oxygen out of the system. But Kapton doesn't have that requirement. If you just hit it with a laser at room temperature under ambient conditions, you get graphene. And obviously, if you're using a laser, you can pretty precisely
So he's
pattern
running that
where you want
fairly
the graphene to
cold.
go. So
Yeah.
this type of pattern is known as the interdigited electrode, where you have one.
So you don't want to blow it
electron
apart,
on
right? You
one
want
other
to
electron on the
burn
other
it
side,
gently.
And there's little fingers.
Right.
that
He
go in
well,
between
or
each other. And
allow
in
it to
between
build up on the
those
surface.
fingers, the electrolyte resides. And
Right,
this
I mean, a
forms the
12-watt
basis
laser,
of the
though, could
supercapacitor.
literally just blow the
And that's
surface
really
off
it.
at
You
that
take
kind
some
of
tape,
focus.
lay it down,
So-
hit it with
Right.
a laser,
You don't want to be
and
too
then add a
aggressive.
little bit of
Yeah.
electrolyte over the top. I'm using.
You know, just for the sake of the show, he should have actually had some goggles on, or
the electrolyte
glasses
that I'm
of
using
sort
is sulfuric
that would-
acid. It's basically car battery acid,
Yes.
essentially.
For anyone
Researchers will
watching, never
tend to
look at a
use
laser this
hydrogel
bright,
so that
even
you
the
don't need a
reflection.
wicking
You will
material.
blind
It's
yourself.
Right,
PVA
right,
and
anything,
sulfuric
right?
acid
There
in
are
gel form, kind of
specific
placed on
laser
And you can either
glasses that
have
are out there
this
for,
large single
you know,
electrode, or,
messing around with
as I
certain
said
things. And
before,
he should
you
have
can
had them
start
on and
making multiple electrodes
maybe
and you
pointed
stack
at them a
up.
couple times and said, "Hey, make
The
sure
reason
that
you
you."
do this is to increase the voltage.
I one time
So
saw the second
regular
bounce
single
off my
electrode
cheek
like this gives you about
because it went down,
0.8
hit the piece of
volts.
wood, then like
Whereas
bounced
the
off my
stacked one
cheek
here, we
under
have
the glasses.
4 electrodes
And that
kind of
was
in a
brighter than
series.
was comfortable.
Will give
so
you theoretically
remember, safety first.
about 3.2
Always,
volts. I found it was
always,
closer to
always.
2.5, probably just due to my manufacturing and inconsistencies. As I mentioned earlier, to increase the voltage of these capacitors, you just stack more of them up in series, essentially, so that one feeds into the next, and each stage of the capacitor increases the voltage.
Most of the rest of this is
What's
just about
slightly different about this
supercapacitor,
type
but
of interdigitated
it's,
electrode is that
an interesting
it
example of
differs
what you
from
can
the
do with
kind of
that.
parallel plate
And so the
capacitor
question
solution
then
that you're
becomes,
normally
what kind
used
of
to.
circuits
So
can
normally
you
a
make
capacitor
out
has
of
two.
this kind of electronics?
Yeah, right. Especially when you can actually make it as pliable. I mean, he could just go and he could take a scissors to that and cut it, and make it as the size that he wants, and it would still conduct just as much as it would at the length that or whatever. Because that's very interesting what you could potentially do.
And they're bendable, so
Right.
it will stay together even when you bend the film.
Which causes like the newer phones or whatever would actually be able to be larger and more flexible if they could actually create a thinner glass that wouldn't break. That's probably the next thing, because if this stuff is as flexible and pliable as it is, the newer electronics are going to be fun.
Well, and he
Plates
was talking
of
about solar panels
Anode
too.
and cathode. They're
Oh,
separate.
yeah, sure.
And like, how would you do that then with the solar panel? How would the solar panel, like, what would you do with this in connection to a solar panel?
Well, this won't work for solar panels because it's not mono layer or whatever. You would still need to do something fancier.
Solar panels are only monolayered. There's so
Well-
much to a solar panel.
You might be able to make solar panels out of foam graphene. I just mean that hasn't been studied the same way.
Oh, okay. I got you.
Oh.
You can also make heaters.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, you can conduct heat across.
But the main
Interesting.
interesting part of this is that you can create flexible circuits. So it's one of the ways you can, say, make circuits at home with a fairly limited set of supplies.
Right. Yeah, it didn't look like he had much there. It was just that little box that, whatever, sat in a gantry.
Yep, it's just the correct plastic film and a laser. Or if you somehow protect it from fire, then you can use wood instead of the plastic film.
So, what would you spray, like a fire retardant on the wood before him?
Not necessarily. I mean, there's certain woods that are like the ones that we were playing with or whatever. It was it's like
Well,
a
and if you're
particle,
allowed-
like a particle board. Like, as opposed to it just being, it was like they took pulverized wood and actually pressed it out and made this particle board. So it was like really, but it was really dense. So we'd go and we'd put a piece of paper on it and we'd run it through a laminator to actually stick the glue to in between the paper and the stock board, and we'd throw it down that laser, and when we'd cut that board, you have to have a vacuum that would actually hold it in place, so that way it wouldn't, just fly around or whatever and kick the piece that's underneath it out of place, so that it would actually stay there. I mean, you seen how there's a lockdown with little clamps or whatever on the plastic. You really need, if you're going to be cutting wood or whatever, burning into wood, you really need ventilation. And that's pretty much what our vacuums were for, was actually ventilation. It would go into a big ventilator that would kick it outside the building, which, probably was some form of pollution, I'm sure. I mean, we had filters that were in between certain areas.
To do it on wood, I
by-
think you can use flame retardant, though. Sorry, just to loop back to Shirt's question.
I would still think that you'd need some kind of really good ventilation either way. 'Cause then you're
Yes, you should not do
cutting-
this somewhere you breathe it. Right, there's little pieces
Right.
of graphene flying through the air. They will
Do
land
not
in your
do
lungs
this
and
in
do
your
something
apartment's
horrible.
complex.
I do this in a professional building with an actual fume hood and not breathing it, mostly.
Yeah, some of those fumes can get a little rough if you get too close. Be careful. I mean, there's these machines that I ran, or whatever. These things were sitting out in the middle of a floor that pretty much, I mean, it had these vacuums that were off of, but they weren't enclosed. I mean, almost anybody that was on the floor, if they walked through there, could walk straight through that little area. We had little signs up: lasers in use. Don't don't come back here, whatever. And it was just us operators and a floor boss that were allowed to actually go into that area. And even the main boss that was, head of the floor bosses or whatever, she wouldn't even come back there or whatever. She'd stand outside of it and wait until you turned around and seen her. And then you'd go stop your machine, and then she'd come in. So she just didn't like the area or whatever because of what it was. You really have to be careful with this kind of stuff.
Well,
Some
and it
kind of
only takes
dielectric.
once that you mess it up, right? One time you walk in when the laser's unshielded or something, and now you can't see.
Right. You really. Oh my God. I mean, it's cool to think about that you can actually do and build this kind of stuff. But at the same time, it's kind of scary to think about it that they're actually trying to stop. Because I mean, they're doing a buildup on there, so I mean, you're automatically going to throw some kind of reflective something somewhere. It's like they didn't stand in the same room with this.
Well, also, that's like a 2.5, 5-watt laser, which is well into burn your skin and instantly blind you territory if you get hit by the beam directly.
Oh yeah, I mean, when we did our training or whatever, we pretty much would go to the point of saying, if you are not careful and you go, because we'd like, ours were a little bit stronger. There's this big, huge battery that would actually push the wattage through or whatever, and it would actually hit a
So
mirror.
this is an engraving laser. A standard cutting laser is like 40, 60, or 100 watts. which
Yeah,
will
see, that's what I was
start
trying to
huge
get at. I
fires
want to say these
immediately.
things were huge, and like they would hit mirrors, and we'd have to actually clean and adjust mirrors to get the pitch right on, to go through these concave and convex mirrors that would actually point this laser at a certain spot. When you hit that go button, it just goes, it just immediately cuts through. So you could hear a high pitch over the top of the vacuum, and we had hearing protection on top of the. We were watching ourselves, and we were like, no, nobody should be allowed back here. And we would look at each other when we would take the front of the front cap off to clean the mirrors. When you take the front cap to clean the mirrors, you'd always make sure you turned around and made sure that the machine was actually off, Because the second you took that mirror out, that laser was no longer going to be directed at anything, and it would cut through absolutely everything that was in front of it. I mean, when you say absolutely everything, we'd be like, it has to be powerful enough that you'd probably hit the other side of the building and cut through everything in the process. Brick walls. You know what I mean? These things
happens.
are right. These things are not something just to screw around with. But
So then, essentially, this is not for personal use. This should be more professional.
yes,
But you're just pointing out how
Well,
cheap
you
and
can use
easy
it in
is.
your garage, right? What we're pointing out is remember to get the shades, lock the door, have an exhaust fan, and read the safety manual. So it's
Okay.
something you could do, but you will blind your child in faster than you can react if they open
your
the garage
dog,
door
or your cat,
without
or-
shades on, right? So you have to be cognizant of that level of danger. Like, this is having a loaded gun in the house, levels of dangerous. Even though the cute machine does not look like a loaded gun. Like, you will instantly blind someone.
like that thing's worse than a bullet. Because because it'll burn your skin. If you think it's instantly going to burn your skin, and it's going to leave probably close to first, second, and third degree burns immediately. If
Well,
you
and you
leave
can
it
imagine-
too long, it's going to do more and more damage. When you
Well,
think
those
about it.
clamps, right? You just get a little misaligned. The laser hits a clamp. The clamp reflects the beam into the window, which fans it out across the living room. And so now anyone who was looking that way in your house at that moment can't see. It's a tool, but it's a tool that you need to be aware is table saw or more dangerous.
Just like your handgun, it's a tool. It's a tool that can be used, but if not improperly trained, you could possibly potentially do something wrong. So I mean, that's exactly what this laser is. It's a tool, and you could use it to do lots of different things. And this is kind of cool because you can actually build electronics as opposed to having to go and buy electronics. If you can actually, force electricity through something like he's doing
how
here.
Electronics work. Like, how many people even have done the step of, let's build a circuit just so I conceptually understand what the magic box is doing.
Oh, several times. I worked at a Radio Shack for a few years.
Right? But no, it's worth doing.
So,
if
I
you
mean,
haven't done it, I would encourage anyone watching to do it.
Yeah.
Wait, to do what? To watch a circuit be made, or?
To make one.
Make a circuit. Go into. I mean, you used to be able to go into your local Radio Shack and actually, buy the parts and pieces, or you could even buy the test kit thing or whatever to actually learn what the things were. The difference between a capacitor and a diode and a whatever, and what each one of them would do with different numbers on them, and how strong and powerful they can actually get. We had so many train enthusiasts would come through and build their train sets or whatever that were electric powered, and they would actually come in and buy all their capacitors and all these diodes and all the little flashing red lights and green lights and stuff or whatever for all their projects. And if you think about it, now they can actually go and they can build that. Per
build
se,
all those little pieces rather than
as opposed to going out and having to purchase them. So then, for $100, you could go and purchase this machine, learn how to use it correctly, and build.
Well, the machine's
parts and
200
pieces that you
the
need.
laser's 100, so altogether it's about
Well,
over 300.
Right. I said 100, but yeah, I mean, you think about
You'll probably
you're going to
be
be spending
about
thousands.
$500 by the time you're fully set up. All the remembering to buy WD-40 kinds of things. But
Well, see, right,
Yeah,
and I'd actually go to
$500
the
is a
point of
serious
buying
topic,
books
yeah.
because you're going to be like us, and you're going to be like, okay, I need to learn how to do this, and then you're buying books. Books are expensive, so you could be up, a couple thousand easily, without
if we're
even.
counting in books, the books are definitely the expensive part of this. Like, I'm thousands into the books and $500 into the machine, right? So
Right, exactly. That's that's what I'm saying. Is this isn't this little weekend project. This is something that you're going to be making your life around almost, and you're going to be trying to always be messing with things and learning with it, and
or for your kids. So this is the other side of it,
Right.
where 3D printing sort of becoming something you could do at home was revolutionary. And so the ability to manufacture circuits at home without having to use crazy chemicals, without having to do this or that, is a big change in the way things work.
So with that all being said,
so this is a it was parallel plate capacitance and electrostatic double layers. So I mean, it was basically it's building. Eventually, it'll get into building dual layered. Like this is a single layer across. They're gonna like get into it a little bit deeper.
Yeah, he gets deeper in the subject of building supercapacitors, but we don't necessarily need to watch that part.
Right. Like I said, I see. I think this is that's where the buffer is. Maybe that's where I think that's where I stopped. I'm like, okay, let's go and check out somebody else. Adding electrolyte and watching capacitance increase. Interesting.
And I look at these for a completely different reason, right? Like what I try to do with them is nothing like what he's doing. It's just coincidentally we're both using graphene and lasers because it's the same easy way to manufacture stuff.
and so what could you do potentially with something like this then? Like what would be like a practical application if someone knew what they were doing with it?
Oh, practical, I don't fucking know. I don't use it for practical things. I don't believe in practicality, except when it comes to growing food.
So he doesn't believe in bananas.
Hey, everyone likes some potassium. Leave the bananas out of this.
Well, you can't be talking about genetically modified organisms and not talk about bananas being genetically modified. So, I mean, so like this one here says adding electrolyte and watching capacitance increase. So then the capacitance, our little things our pictures are over the top of it, aren't they?
Yep. To answer more directly, though, one of the things you do is build fancy radio gear. So the laser.
Well, it's right, and that's what I was just going to say. So if you can increase the density on that, oops, let's not do that. If you can increase the density and increase the capacitance, then he's able to actually build, stronger capacitors that would actually be able to hold more power, more energy, to actually power something larger than with a flexible pattern. That'd be interesting.
That's one use. The other one that I'm looking at is antenna, where you want your antenna to have a very unusual shape, because you can just sort of laser the shape out as you want it.
Sure. That's awesome. That's an interesting thought on that. If you actually could, graphene. Well, because you said antenna, so then immediately what I think about is on top of the antenna would be like running like electrical lines through your home. Almost be the same idea as it's supposed to cutting holes to run, lengths of wire or whatever. You could almost, run a laser across the board that would actually put a laser track, this track of, that would throw, electricity across it without creating fire. That'd be very interesting because this is the way same thing what your antenna does. You're gonna throw it up. You're gonna throw cords and cables through, and you're gonna feed it up to the, to conduct your RF signals.
Well, and particularly when you want a
Second.
3D shape, right? So there's this subject called metamaterials, and it's basically materials that replicate something. And it's mostly just a name for fancy antennas to get funding. But you have a 3D geometry, right? So some kind of 3D shape you're trying to replicate. And one way to do that easily is to slice it into layers and then each layer carve it out. And so you can imagine you take, say, thin slices of wood, carve the antenna shape onto each slice, and then stack those slices. And now you have a 3D shape.
Which, yeah, that'd be interesting. Because then you wouldn't have to worry about angle or the antenna or whatever, trying to move things or whatever. You'd just be able to set it
Well,
out.
there's lots of
And it would
research
pick up-
uses. The main
Right.
benefit is the traditional way to do this is using crazy acids that etch copper off of fiberglass.
So let's just guess that's what they're probably trying to use for 6G.
Everything, just literally everything.
Because
That's how
we've
your
talked
motherboard
about
is made,
five.
right?
We've talked
They,
about 5G
wash
on this
the
channel
copper off
before.
with acid.
Sure. We had a big episode on 5G, and I'd guess that that's what they'd probably end up using is a lot of graphene or whatever for 6G product.
Yeah, to colonize your body. Allegedly. Who?
That's
Jeez,
interesting.
shirts,
I didn't hear anything.
jeez. Allegedly.
Yeah, no. But anywho's, so I heard you could do a radio and an antenna. So what kind of like a radio? Are you talking pick up a radio signal from a radio station? Or are you talking hey, you can make a radio receiver and then do it from there, or how exactly?
So the way
radio
you did in this video, right? A radio is just some capacitors and some resistors and an antenna in the right shape. And so you can just cut all of that into a piece of wood.
Cool. And then what could you use that for? Just anything that a radio signal would require?
Yeah, I look at fancy optics problems, right? So the whole reason for this is that it's actually very obnoxious to make research materials. They're very expensive. And so buying sheets of wood and a laser is much less money.
Should we watch any more of this guy?
Nah, it's fine.
Okay. Was there anything else that you had? And you had so many links that you threw inside my show setup. I was like, oh my lord, there's a lot. There's a whole bunch. There's so much information about this. It's almost ridiculous.
It's very
Sorry,
interesting.
remove all the embeds because I can't see what's happening. Okay. So the reason that you want to look at this, right, is there's a whole bunch of fancy optics problems. And so that's the second post I had, was just why would you care about fancy optics equipment at all? And it turns out that a warp drive is apparently a fancy optics problem. And that's what I'm still not entirely sure of, but there it is.
A warp drive? What's a warp drive?
Like in Star Trek?
Like warp drive?
Warp drive?
What's not a warp drive? Oh, is this optical vortex one?
It's the one under that.
DARPA-funded research accidentally discovers the world's first warp bubble.
Yep.
Okay, let's throw this one over here. This is an article Not a video, correct?
Correct. I think.
Correct. Okay, let's see here. Share screen. This one. DARPA-funded researchers accident. Oh, see what I do? Dang it. Sit there and boomer through it. DARPA-funded researchers accidentally discovered the world's first warp bubble. Engage.
Engage.
Warp drive pioneer and former NASA warp drive specialist Dr. Harold G. Sonny White has reported the discovery of an actual real-world warp bubble. And according to White, the first of its kind breakthrough by this Limitless Space Institute team sets a new starting point for those trying to manufacture a full-size warp-capable spacecraft. Ooh. Where are we going? Where are we going? Why are we doing this? In an interview, White added that our detailed numerical analysis of our custom cashmere cavities helped us identify a real and manufacturable nano microstructure that is predicted to generate a negative vacuum energy density such that it would manifest a real nanoscale warp bubble. Not an analog, but a real thing. In other words, a warp bubble structure will manifest around these specific conditions. White cautioned that this does not mean we are near building a fully functional warp drive, as much more science needs to be done. To be clear, our finding is not a warp bubble analog. This is a real, albeit humble and tiny warp bubble, White told the debrief, hence the significance. That looks fun. An exotic matter ring, expanded space. Is Mike with us?
I am.
Okay.
Oh boy.
You've read through all of this?
Yep. So those Casimir cavities are in fact just tiny little resonators a certain size, which is part of why you would want a very precise laser cutting circuits for you.
Uh-oh, someone's not
Keep
happy.
going. Yep, he's got a mom. He's good.
Part of the reason I've been looking into building circuits with the laser is to replicate results like this myself.
Where are you trying to go?
Fuck out of here.
At the end of every one of your videos, Koolfrogg, I don't want to live on this planet any longer.
Do I need the readdress? In 1994, Mexican mathematician Miguel Almaguer proposed the first mathematically valid solution to the warp drive. More specifically, he outlined a specific propulsion system previously only envisioned in science fiction that can traverse the cosmos above the speed of light without violating currently accepted laws of physics. That solution was lauded for its elegant mathematics, yet simultaneously derided for its use of theoretical materials and massive amounts of energy that appeared virtually impossible to engineer in any practical way. Over a decade later, The theory underwent a major shift when Dr. White and then NASA-employed warp drive specialist and founder of the highly respected Eagleworks Laboratory reworked Alcubierre's original metric and put it into canonical form? What's that? Canonical?
Standard form.
Just the standard?
Yeah, whatever is the standard for the field.
Oh, okay. This change in design dramatically reduced the exotic materials and energy requirements of the original concept, seemingly providing researchers and science fiction fans alike at least a glimmer of hope that real-world warp drive may one day become a reality. It also resulted in an informal renaming of the original theoretical design, a concept now more commonly referred to as the Alcubierre White Warp Drive. I'm going to step away for a few seconds. You guys kind of hold the show up for a second. I'm going to see if I can't help out the situation.
Certainly.
Well,
Quick Shirts, talk about the agenda while he's gone.
the agenda.
You should wait for me to walk away first.
He's like, peekaboo.
That's the problem with him not being on webcam. But the bigger context here is that you can build the sort of Casimir cavities they're talking about at the start of this article using this graphene process. And one of the reasons that I'm interested in it is to pull the cost down to that price point, where you're talking about, let's say, $500 in startup costs to do this kind of advanced scientific research instead of tens of thousands it costs right now. And one of the things that's really sort of stalling out scientific research is the inability to get funding for projects, the inability to test this in practice, right? To just go build it. And I have a lot of engineering experience, so this seemed like something I could sort of help with.
Neato.
Yes, sir. Well, the big challenges remaining is still the software for it, right? You can see everyone sort of doing very simple projects, and that's partly just because while the technology exists, the know-how does not.
So then, I don't know if the other links go into any other explanation as to how the wood is involved in all of this. But like, so what is your theory on, I guess I could say theory, right? About how this could be used, how this kind of thing of like, you know, using this sort of technology of this sort with the laser and all that to make circuitry and capacitors, whatever type stuff with the wood. How exactly would all that go about with the wood? Then, like,
Well,
so you use the laser.
The example we saw, right, was him doing it with a kind of plastic. But you can do the same thing with wood, where you sort of cut that shape into it and it's a supercapacitor. Have you ever seen plywood being made?
Maybe. I mean, not in
Okay.
real life, but you know.
But just a video of it, so you sort of understand the concept.
I think so.
I may have Koolfrogg pull this up when he gets back, but
I'm back.
okay. Can we? Let
Yeah.
me find a good video.
Yeah, sure. Did you catch the thumbnail?
I did. We're getting to that because Shirts asked the relevant question.
Okay. I was gonna say because I put the thumbnail the way you wanted it because you're like you need to do it this way, and it took me, I don't know, probably a good hour and a half to actually get that, and that's why it looks the way it does. But it looks all right.
No, Koolfrogg, we don't appreciate anything you do. It's terrible. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, that's what my conclusion is that it's probably horseshit compared to what everybody else does.
Well, it doesn't have to.
Okay, add a plywood video to private chat so we can bring that up while we start talking about how wood is involved in this whole process.
Cool.
Oh, see, let's see. Oh, okay. Was I sharing the screen for a while?
Yeah, it was still on that article, but now it's not.
Okay. Oh, we didn't finish the article. Did we need to
that's
finish
okay.
the article?
I guess.
Doesn't matter, we're on the plywood.
Okay, we'll just move on.
Okay. Had to add some sound effects because can't really see the captions.
I think we're good. The part we want is ahead a little bit where they start trying to
Oh,
into
we're
actual
watching
sheets.
this.
But no, we can watch it. I was just letting you know I don't have narration to add until we
So
get to the
my
relevant
my
section.
hometown was actually a logging town on the Mississippi River. So, you know, I did the.
Oh, yeah?
I remember doing the history research on my hometown and even the area that I'm currently living in or whatever, and you know, lots of logs being transported through and off of the Mississippi River. So yeah, this is cool. They had stopped doing it by the time I was born, but you know, I did the research on it anyway.
This area still does some lumber, just because we have the woodlands for it, and the mountains aren't good for much else.
Sure.
So they don't actually do this stuff on the water still, do they?
I'm sure they do in some places for some
When it's available.
applications. Right. I mean, it's the easiest,
So
cheapest
this is where we're
way.
going to start getting into it there. You can see how it's taking off a thin layer, right? And it's basically turning the
Turn
wood
it
into these
into-
thin sheets. They're
Right.
sort of
So
veneer,
super thin.
but basically paper-esque.
Oh, there's
And so-
there's verbiage underneath.
Yeah. What you would do, right, is at this stage where they're drawing it out, you would add the laser pattern to it. And so this would be a way to add a lot of circuitry, let's say.
To like a big sheet of something all at once.
Right. Oh. We're getting repositioned.
Let's try it this way. And we can see what it says. The veneer is then cut into shorter lengths by guillotine.
Kind of like some of the elites' bodies. When
So
we'll no, I'm just
lengths
kidding.
are carried in conveyor into the clipper where they're
Allegedly.
cut into size to make plywood,
Alleged.
which is very, you know, flexible, and if you get it wet, you can flex it and you can bend it where you want to bend it to, and then let it dry.
so
And
the point that they
it'll
start stacking them back together right there is where it gets interesting, because there's certain kinds of circuits that only work as a volume. They don't work as a 2D structure. And so one of the reasons you'd be interested in making whole sheets of circuitry is because you're going to actually make plies of them the same way you make plywood, where you stack it back together at the very end.
Gotcha.
Dried veneers are removed. Any holes and imperfections in the wood are patched. Huh, fun. Glue is evenly
So it would
applied
be
to the
just
veneers.
before this glue step that you sort of added the circuit to it, right? There would just be one more step where you lasered on the circuit to each veneer, and then you glue them together.
Sure, sure. That makes sense. Right there, right in between each one of those. You go and run across the top of it. You could, if you could mass produce that. I mean, you could almost do it on each one of those thin layers that are being sent through this little gluing machine.
Correct. And you can basically just have a thing that scans back and forth the whole way across, right? And cut the whole width of it at once with the fancier, like a multi-laser array.
I mean, so the press applies immense pressure and heat, after which the veneers are transformed into plywood. So then, if you wanted to create more capacity where you would be able to actually put a thicker layer in there of that graphene and then apply the heat to actually, and the immense pressure in there, whatever.
Well, so the heat applied here, right, isn't enough to scorch the wood. It'll be fine from a heat perspective.
No, I'm just, I mean, so that, because you're not going to put the same amount of heat that it's actually allowed to actually conduct or whatever. You're going to actually just,
Correct.
right, that's fun.
And so this gives you a way to start building volumetric circuits, which is a technology we don't currently have.
The plywood boards are removed from the press. That are trimmed to standard size, which in this process, and it's like after you already had all this laid in, whatever, you could actually have preset sizes and lengths for, particular builds of homes or whatever that you're going to put these in, or if whatever you're going to do with them. And that could be interesting.
Yep.
You'd probably be able to see, like, as opposed to just seeing a white edge, you'd probably be able to see like a beaded edge inside there or whatever that would be, dark grayish color
and
or
more
whatever.
than that, right? Because they're trying to manufacture them in thin sheets, they don't glue them in thicker panels. But you could glue a whole cube of wood back together. And so you could build these as structural cubes if you were doing processed lumber for large buildings. And so the structural element of your manufactured lumber building could also double as a data center.
Watch me get struck for playing that music that whole time.
Probably.
Never thought about that.
It's fine. There's ways to get it removed if I need to.
And so you're saying that, like, someone could build a house with circuitry in it?
Yes, but that's not
Yeah.
the main benefit still.
Yeah, right. There has to be so much more that's available to do. I mean,
So
with
back to
this.
this whole thing about volumetric circuits. It turns out that fancy
Okay, so-
optics.
we're good with the plywood.
Yep.
Okay. Which one
It
do you...
turns out that fancy optics is one of the approaches to quantum computing. Ta-da! And so one of the things you can do with volumetric circuits, commonly called metamaterials, is work on quantum computing via optics, something China has successfully demonstrated in their universities. And so one of the things you could theoretically do with, say, plywood-sized sheets of this is start building quantum computers.
Out of wood?
Correct.
Yeah.
And so this brings us to the theme of tonight's show. Ian was right. There is a market for carbon in the future, which will elevate the price of lumber to the value of quantum computers.
Will it elevate it, or will it make it the same price as lumber would because of its availability, because it's wood?
Well, either way, right? What will happen when you can turn wood into quantum computers is either the price of it goes up, or more realistically, we just grow a lot more lumber and decide we can get away with some less farmland, more lumber. You know, we have too much corn, let's grow more trees. And then we end up turning it into computers. Well, the computer is only useful as it stays in one piece, which means we have now sealed that carbon back into a block and then stuck it underground, where it's harder for cosmic rays or whatever to interfere with it. And so we have created an economic incentive to bury the carbon again.
So you'd almost think that you'd almost think that you'd be able to do something with the fibers of whatever, cannabis plant.
So you could use almost any plant. The reason that you would want to use lumber, though, is because having that plywood sheet structure gives you structure to your computer, right? Because you have the thin layers that have the XY, and then the layering gives you Z. And so that gives you a way to structure your circuit in 3D in a way that's going to hold firm without having to do further steps, right? You just glue the plywood back together.
I got you.
So, but what you're saying is that after you're done with it, you bury it back into the ground, and then it does what?
I mean, not literally bury it, right? But you want to protect it from cosmic rays and sources of interference. And one of the easiest ways is to, say, buy an old mine and just stick it in there. And so you end up in the situation where, in order to build your quantum data center, you are growing a bunch of trees, turning them into carbon, pressing that into bricks, and then sticking it in an old mine.
Neat.
Weird.
And this is why Bill Gates doesn't get to be in charge of the New World Order, because, like, he has all that money, but can't figure out how to turn trees into carbon again.
I don't think he's very interested in that.
Right, that's why he's not in charge.
He's very interested in depopulation. And using the graphene to do certain things, because probably one of these numbers is going to have to get pretty near to zero. You just hear him laughing.
One of them. Just one of them.
That's just a fact of high school.
Apparently you could hear me from across the apartment.
I just heard this fake chuckling. I was like, I got you.
I mean, your Bill Gates impression is spot on.
Yeah. He's working on his Nancy Pelosi. He does a pretty good job at that one, too.
And now Ukraine, Zelensky is now St. Patrick, or St. Patrick is Zelensky. I get that confused all the time.
These people are just so bad at their job, it's kind of offensive.
Well, that's why I put it at the beginning of my show all the time, as I run a little series of how idiotic some of our government officials can be. And I say some, I mean almost all.
That's the way Soros likes them.
534 of them.
And the more obedient to him, the better, according to him.
Right. But no, here's the problem with that. We have a mandate to get the tree computers done, and they're now in the way of that, so they're gonna have to figure it the fuck out. I mean, you think I'm joking, sure. Just watch.
Yeah, he's not. I don't think you're joking. I don't think.
I don't think he's choking either. He's smoking. Man.
Did you have another something? One of these that you wanted to do articles that you wanted pulled up?
Oh, I got
lot
stoned halfway through this. I just posted a bunch of science while I remembered it.
So now he's no. He's like, oh yeah, that got to my point of Ian from Timcast was right.
That was
so
the
now
main
I'm
point
done.
of this. Ian was right. We concluded that. I guess we could talk about optical vortex knots because reality is apparently just bullshit, and you can knot it up, and then that's a thing.
Okay. Do you want the Wikipedia page, or do you want one of these? Is there something else that's in one of these that you want?
Isolated optical vortex knots, the nature.com one. Sorry. I had to look for a moment.
Nature.com article? Isolated optical vortex knots? Okay, let's see here. Because if we haven't boomered through any of this tonight...
Oh, we have to double boomer it. This is definitely the topic to boomer it up on.
Nice! Yes. Published January 17th, 2010.
Yeah.
Nearly a dozen years ago. Isolated optical vortex knots. Abstract, natural and artificially created light
don't
fields.
read this. You should just scroll down to the first picture.
Pictures, please.
So, let's explain this not in their language. But the gist of it is the Greeks were right, and the fates tie reality into a weave of fate. And modern physics has just caught up to that eternal truth, apparently. Because that's what they drew on this picture. But it turns out that if you just tie knots in things, that's a fact. And it exists quantum mechanically too. For reasons that no one has a good answer for. And so they did this with light and some fancy gratings a while back, apparently a decade or so. And this is the pictures of that.
Oh. I clicked on it. I'm like, oh.
Even better.
Even better. Look at that. Do I need to read any of this? Just leave it up and let you talk?
God, if this technology becomes available to your average Joe, you'll have girls sitting around braiding each other's hair and braiding a light. God, it's going to be ridiculous. No, I'm just kidding.
That's already what I do on Friday afternoons. Braid light. That's just what I hang out and do.
That's his hobby, braiding light.
True story. That's why the Glowies keep trying to recruit me. I'm way better at it than them. Yeah, so anyway, I don't know how to relate how weird it is. This is just a fact, other than to tell you, if you tie a knot in reality, that's a thing. And it turned out the Greeks were right yet again.
Now
Were
all
they
we
ever
have
wrong?
to do is find Atlantis.
We found Atlantis.
I thought it was in Africa.
That's what I thought.
Well, some
Up in
people
the-
say that, but then other people say it's like those other islands that are out in the Atlantic or whatever.
The other islands that are out in the Atlantic.
You know, what are they called? Well, I forgot what they're called. Dang. They're like out from Spain. Not the ones that are owned by Spain. They're out further from there. They're very, very small.
I bet
Some
there's a
people-
real Atlantis, and they just agreed not to tell us because it's awesome.
Oh, I always thought it was up in the or assumed whatever from stories, whatever, that it was up in the north west whatever section of Africa. So I mean, really, some of those islands could kind of be,
It does
like
look like the
offshoots
thing in
and
Africa.
It does, yeah. And it looks like water swept over it and all that,
And it's just years and years of erosion and use, whatever, blah blah blah.
I mean,
this,
even
that,
the
and other thing
Aztecs
happened.
have their ancestry, they claim, came from Aztlan or whatever. And many people think that, that's relating to Atlantis. Like, it's...
I mean, maybe like we used to be Pangea and God just fucked us up.
He separated us. That was he's the one that caused the separation.
Straight up just crushed Atlantis and fucked all the continents up.
So that's not to throw a twist in the show or anything, but yes, we went to Atlantis. Where is the lost empire, the lost city of Atlantis?
I mean,
'Cause
since we brought up the Greeks, I
it
just threw...
does pertain to knots and light.
Look, if we're going to talk about how to braid light like the fates out of wood, then we can go ahead and talk about Atlantis. I'm down.
Because it only makes sense anyway. I bet there's so many things that this world already knew, and they destroyed it. And we're starting over again. So let's stop sharing this screen, and we'll just go and we'll share this one. Because you said to. There you go. Ancient Greek city of Atlantis is supposedly a fictional island. But, they got this strange map here. I've never seen this map before.
Oh, you've never seen that? That's like I think this is like just an artist's rendition. But yeah, there's like a small group of islands. What are they called? The
This is-
Azores or whatever?
Published in Amsterdam, the map is oriented with the south at the top, which is the reason why you see America on that side and Africa on this side. There's the south at the top. We're just gonna sit here in silence. Silence, I say. See that? I mean,
There's like, what is the name of these? Yeah, like the Azores. Is what
See, I always thought it was right here. As you can see, this is
there's like a group
Europe.
of them.
Top side of Africa.
Okay, so here's this. There's France, Exploration Islands, Azores. Then French Azores, then Portuguese Azores. They have it split up. And I don't know how habitable these little islands are. They're just like very tiny. But they are there. And so I've heard people talk about like, oh yeah, that's what that is.
And I think that's pretty much where our story ends for the night.
What, we're not going to show the African ruins?
Okay. Oh
yeah, you can do that.
Okay.
We at least have to round out Atlantis.
These ones. Let's. Oh.
What are you doing?
He killed it.
Boomer. Is this Atlantis hiding in plain sight in the Sahara? See, I mean, there's your. Oh, there's a.
I mean, we have to watch the YouTube video now.
Not only did the lost city of Atlantis
this guy.
actually exist, but its true location has been hiding in plain sight for thousands of years, completely unnoticed, as we've
I'm
been looking in
impressed
all
with
the
this
wrong places
crystal.
for its location, since everyone assumes that it must be under the ocean somewhere, such as in the depths of the Atlantic Ocean or the Mediterranean Sea, which have long been considered to be the most likely places for its existence. And no, I am not about to suggest that Antarctica is the hidden location of Atlantis either. Because in this
That's a little
video, I'm going
far-fetched.
to use the exact words that Plato used to describe Atlantis, its location, and the geographical
That's where
land
it was
features
in
that surround it,
SG1.
which were recorded in Plato's dialogues, the Critias and
Wait,
the
say that again?
Timaeus. And many people are not even aware that the information contained in Plato's
That's where
writings
Atlantis
of
was in
Atlantis
Stargate
actually
SG1,
originate from
the
the
South
ancient
Pole.
Egyptians. And the details that Plato shared of Atlantis, which I'm about to share with you in a side-by-side comparison, will show you that the Ricart structure located in Mauritania, Africa, also commonly referred to as the Eye of the Sahara or the Eye of Africa, which most people have never even heard of, by the way, is the most likely location for the lost city of Atlantis, as it matches so many precise details of what Plato wrote. But it must first be mentioned that according to mainstream academics and historians, the legend of Atlantis is simply fictional and has been commonly referred to as a myth or even pseudo-history, which completely contradicts Plato and Solon, which described an empire referred to as Atlantis, which was known for being technologically advanced, with noble and powerful people possessing vast wealth, luxury, and knowledge, and even military superiority, and is described as being destroyed in a single day and night of misfortune, which caused the island of Atlantis to disappear into the depths of the sea, related to a massive earthquake and likely a tsunami. So first things first, Plato received all the information about Atlantis from Solon, who was his ancestral relative separated by 6 generations. Solon was born in Athens, Greece some 2,600 years ago, and was an Athenian statesman, lawmaker, and poet, remembered particularly for his efforts to legislate against political corruption and economic and social decline in Athens. He was known to be a person of wisdom and outstanding character. In Solon's later years, he traveled to Egypt in the search of knowledge, and Egypt at that time had the longest documented historical records available. And he visited Neph's temple at Sais, where he learned of the history of Atlantis from a high Egyptian priest who translated the hieroglyphs that were carved into stone within the temple, which also described that Egypt was once a colony of the Empire of Atlantis. And Neph's temple no longer exists today, as it was destroyed long ago when it was consumed by what is now the Nile Delta swamplands. However, thanks to Solon's detailed notes, the information was retained and kept for 6 generations within Plato's family, before it was published by Plato himself in the Critias and the Timaeus dialogues approximately 2,400 years ago. So one of the first things to point out is the
One of the first things to point out is this guy's kind of weird. I mean, I find it interesting that on his theory on where this actually could potentially be, and that's where I always kind of thought it was in this particular spot.
Well, if you look at sea levels and stuff in the Sahara and everything else, and I think he points this out in this video. I don't know. I think I've seen this one, or it might have been another one I watched, but it was something to do with that. And so it would have been that part of Africa would have been separated, and the Atlantic Ocean would have actually gone around the bottom of that and cut into the Mediterranean. And so it would have actually been like an island unto itself, that region, or a couple of islands or whatever.
Sure.
Because sea levels were different and stuff, and then eventually like something happened or whatever, and then blah blah blah. Sea levels go up, down, waters shift, stuff happens. And they say the Nile runs, in like ancient times, the Nile ran across the Sahara into Egypt and then down through the Delta. And then now the other part of the Nile that used to be just a tributary is now the main head. That's what a lot of people say about the maps and things. That are
well, it's actually really depleted right now because Ethiopia went and built a big, huge dam. That stopped the flow of the river. That was one of its main tributaries or whatever lead-offs or head-offs, whatever. However it worked out, and it actually reduced the size. So cutting out like certain population of food.
Yeah, everybody upstream from that's gonna want to
Downstream.
go to war.
Right.
Or yes, downstream. Sorry.
Downstream, yeah.
Up, down, sideways.
Well, I mean, the people immediately upstream are all dead now, right? Like their houses are underwater, so they're not feeling anything.
Right. There was a big, huge dam that they built there too, and it took like quite a few years for this to actually fill up its reservoir.
Did China do it?
Supposed date of Atlantis' destruction, according to what Solon had learned while visiting Egypt, which was that the event that destroyed the lost city had occurred 9,000 years earlier, which is a very interesting time frame, considering that Solon visited Egypt 2,600 years ago. And 9,000 years plus 2,600 years equates to 11,600 years before present time today, which just so happens to coincide with the Younger Dryas climate catastrophe, which of course I've discussed in many other videos. Long story short, to anyone that's not familiar or new to the channel, there was a massive change in global temperatures, sea levels fluctuated, a massive extinction event of 75% of mammals in North America occurred. There's even evidence of global fires said to have been larger than the ones that occurred during the extinction event that killed off the dinosaurs, scorching at least 10% of the Earth's land surface. The evidence for this event is scientifically overwhelming and is likely related to a fragmented comet. And the point is that it's very likely that this event is related in some way to the destruction of Atlantis. And for more details...
I can help myself.
So, I mean, it's kind of interesting how they built it, you know, the Temple of Poseidon, and they got this smaller ring inside, a larger ring island. So it was like, this is copper wall, shipping basins, race course. Yeah, absolutely. You run a race around that? Because you got to have fun. Barracks.
Oh man, the Greeks were into their races.
And you see, this is all out here. Looks like it's all farmland. It's just areas, just open space, and everybody would conjugate in the center. Fun.
I highly recommend you look into the brilliant work of Randall Carlson and Graham Hancock. But what are the odds that this date of 11,600 years ago
And it was all
would match
Joe
so
Rogan
perfectly?
things.
And that's not the only thing that matches up so closely. Most notably, Atlantis was said to be made up of concentric circles, 3 rings of water and 2 of land. In fact, here are Plato's exact words.
Wait, what?
There were alternate zones of sea and land, larger and smaller in...
What?
How does that work?
I don't. How does what work? What's your
I'm just
question?
confused by the ring of water on the outside. Never mind. Whatever. Go ahead. Doesn't matter.
3 rings of water and 2 of land. In fact, here are Plato's exact words. There were alternate zones of sea and land, larger and smaller, encircling one another. There were 2 of land and 3 of water, which were turned as if with a lathe, each having its circumference equidistant every way from the center. And here you can see a few animated examples of what people have created.
So, I mean...
Yeah,
how's
I'm
this
just
giving me this? So there's your 1, 2, 3 rings of water with 2 rings of land. And a big circle in the center.
Based off of Plato's description of Atlantis.
And another interesting
Now,
thing
compare
that I'd
this
like
to
to
the
point out
Ricard
as
structure.
well. Oh yeah, there's that, right? Is that if you noticed what the Aztecs did with Mexico City, right? They had Mexico City in the middle of water, and then they surrounded, like the whole city is surrounded with water. That's why Mexico City is at the plane in which it is. That's why it's like at or below sea level or whatever. Is because that's how that happened.
It's very
and
much
they
below
surrounded
sea
their
level.
Water. The city is surrounded with water, and they have their temple in the center, and they did it all. And it's almost constructed very similarly to the idea of this sort of a thing, right? Where like you surround it with water, and then the center is the temple and the city, and then like you build like this. The temple is the very center, and then there's the city all around, and then there's this. Like that's how they constructed it. And then there's the tales of like how they came from. And I can't find it now, but I watched it where someone was talking about a transcript of it, like their what do they call that? The place where they came from basically was described as like Atlantis almost. I forget that Aztlan, that's what it's called, and it almost has a little bit of like like Aztec, Aztlan, Atlantis, like so. I mean, could be, but hey,
Sure.
I just thought that was interesting because I was like, oh, because I mentioned it earlier. Like the construction is kind of like the same idea, in a way. Anyway.
Sure.
Sure. Just look at this. The first thing that you must understand when you see
Just
this
look
is
at
that this is far larger than it looks. For example, this photo right here was taken from high altitude, and what you're seeing is something around 20 miles across, or 32 kilometers. And this particular photo does not even show the entire structure, which is approximately 30 miles across. And this site can really only be appreciated from space and satellite imagery, as it covers a vast area. In fact, the Ricard structure wasn't even discovered until the Gemini 4 mission in 1965 and is now a common landmark utilized by astronauts. This thing was hiding in plain sight for thousands of years, but when you look at photos of it from the ground, you have no idea what you're looking at. Only from the sky can you understand that you are part of this massive structure containing circles within circles. And in this example, you can see one of the outer rings in the distance, yet from the ground, it just looks like a hill. It's remarkable at just how much it does resemble an eye, and it makes perfect sense as to why it was given the nickname of the Eye of the Sahara and the Eye of Africa. And by the way, it is located approximately 250 miles or 400 kilometers inland off the coast of West Africa in a very remote area which is rarely visited and again unknown to most people. What's even more fascinating than its size and shape is that scientists do not know what it is or how it was formed, although they do think that it is natural and it was first theorized to have been an impact site from a meteor, but that was ruled out as there is no evidence of an impact. In fact, scientists have never seen anything like this anywhere else throughout the entire world. Their number one guess is that it was probably formed around 100 million years ago as the supercontinent Pangaea was ripped apart by plate tectonics in what is now Africa and South America. They theorize that molten rock was pushed upwards towards the surface, but never made it all the way through, thus creating a dome of rock layers. And they suggest that at some point around 100 million years ago, the eye of the structure erupted, collapsing the bubble which makes up the center part of the structure, and erosion did the rest of the work to create what you see today, which is clearly
God
heavily
smote
eroded.
Atlantis and
But this, of course,
Pangaea.
is all
It
speculation
happened.
as it cannot be proven, and again, we've never seen anything like this anywhere else throughout the world. But here's where things start to get really interesting. It just so happens that the diameter of its outer circle is approximately 23.5 kilometers or 14.5 miles, which is basically equivalent to the size and dimensions provided by Plato when converting from stadia to modern measurements. For example, the circular island of Atlantis was described as being 127 stadia. Well, one stadia is 607 feet, and 607 feet times 127 stadia is 77,089 feet. Convert that measurement, and that is 23.5 kilometers. I measured this numerous times on Google Earth, and I got anywhere from 21 kilometers to 24 kilometers. Most of my measurements were 22 kilometers in diameter, and again, this is virtually identical to Plato's and Solon's documentation. And although my own measurements through Google Earth cannot be considered exact, it is unbelievably close. So where we're at so far is that the Ricard structure matches Plato's description of having 3 circles of water and 2 of land, which is what you would see at the Ricard based off its design if there were water flowing into it. And not only that, the diameter of the outer circles matches the size described by Plato within a very small margin, if not identical. But this next detail that Plato describes is extremely interesting. He stated, and quote, "The mountains of the island of Atlantis was celebrated for their number and size and beauty," adding that the surrounding mountains of the city flowed with rivers, and this part of the island looked toward the south and was sheltered from the north. So he is stating that the mountains were on the north side, sheltering the city to the south, which is exactly what you see at the Ricards, and the mountains are on the north side. But not only that, when you look at detailed satellite photography, you can see the evidence of multiple rivers that were spilling over the side of the mountains towards Atlantis. Can you imagine what this place looked like when it wasn't so dry? Just like Plato stated, the mountains of the island of Atlantis were celebrated for their number and size and beauty. And it's a shame that the Ricard is so remote and visited so rarely, as there are so few pictures available of the view of these mountains when standing at ground level. But I can just imagine that these mountains were lush and beautiful green with rivers and waterfalls pouring over these mountains, and the rivers were clearly there. We can see that. So it's certain that this place once looked much differently than the barren, dry desert that we see today. And this clearly matches Plato's description, and it becomes even more compelling when you consider that Plato stated that the city of Atlantis opened up to the sea at the south. Well, look at these photos, where you can see that there is an opening at the south of the Ricard structure. So if there was once water here, and if it neighbored the sea, this would further match Plato's description. I mean, doesn't this match what a waterway outlet would look like? And not only that, doesn't the entire was blasted by flowing water or a tsunami? You can see the striations in the land going from west to east from the ocean. Tell me that this doesn't look like a massive wave or a steady flow of water completely altered the terrain. And it's also worth mentioning that scientists have emphasized that the Ricard is heavily eroded, which the circular walls clearly show us. Now, consider Plato's exact words in regards to the aftermath of the cataclysm. Quote, "Atlantis is part of the Atlantic which is no longer accessible by ship. Atlantis, when sunk by the earthquake, became an impassable barrier of mud to voyagers sailing from hence to any part of the ocean. In other words, it became landlocked." Again, if this is the site of Atlantis, and if the details shared by Solon and Plato are true, and if the Ricard structure was the site of Atlantis, then it's not hard to see that perhaps a lot of sand or mud was pushed into Africa from the ocean during some sort of catastrophic event, and
it's an awesome thought, and I kind of think this is kind of where I always kind of thought this is what, exactly what it was. I don't know if we need to listen to this guy anymore. Thought there was something else that I was going to look up, and I forgot what it was. Brownie's the only one that still has a capacity to think about something yet tonight.
Atlantis!
Well, there is.
No,
if you wanted to keep going with this, there's a guy, Randall Carlson, that was also on this Joe Rogan podcast, talks about all this stuff, and he goes into very great detail and like all kinds of videos and things of this nature. But I don't know if you want to go into anything that he does. I don't know if it's too late now, but
Carl,
there
who?
is that. Randall Carlson is his name.
Randall Carlson?
Yeah.
All the way back in... Oh, he did something in 2022. Randall Carlson's take on Atlantis. Interesting. We're going into Joe Rogan experience stuff. Oh man.
Yeah. Ooh.
Okay, let's stop sharing that.
But anyways, that's that. I don't know if you want to look at it.
Oh, it's coming. Just hold on.
Oh, okay. I mean, there's multiple videos. I don't know what you want to look at.
This one's a 14-minute video. Let's see what this Randall Carlson had to say about Atlantis.
He's the guy that talks about it. Well, he's not the only person, but he's one of the big people that talks about it being those islands, the Azores, in the Atlantic. I think it's how you pronounce that. But yeah.
Oh. Oh. Sorry. I thought.
Oh, you thought it was sharing? Stoned.
I thought it was.
Oh, nerd.
Because it takes me from one screen to the next, and it brings me back to I have to go back to the other screen that I need to be at to make sure that it's up, and then go to the other one and hit the play button.
The Joe Rogan.
We've done tonight, and we're gonna stop it right there.
Tune into it yourself to find out more.
Right. If you want to find out more, you tune into it and actually check it out. It's only another 5-6 minutes long, whatever. It's not that bad. But at the same time, I've been here for almost 2 hours, and I got some other obligations that I got to get to. So, all that being said,
And of course, we went to this because obviously the thing with like bending light and referencing Plato, and then I had to crack the thing with Atlantis, and then just kind of spun out of that. So that's how we ended up here. But
So, okay,
interesting night, very educational, interesting night.
Very different, strange, right? So, okay, so what I was gonna do here is, if you ever feel the need to speak with the intelligence of Mike, you subscribe to my channel here. I'll get you a Discord link, and we'll throw you in Discord, and you can join the conversation with the intelligence of Mike.
VIP, limited time.
It seems as though he may have some issues. It looked like he logged out of his Discord, but now all of a sudden he's mobile Discord. So maybe he'll. I'm thinking something gave out. Oh, he's typing a message. My internet died.
Oh. That's what happened. Okay.
That's all fun. And that's what I figured it was going to be. So anyway, if you ever want to actually talk to this man, you actually come through me. You hit the subscription button. Let me know that you hit the subscription button, and I'll give you a Discord link. You come join us in Discord, and you may actually come across him and actually hold a conversation with him on a regular basis. Another person that you see on a regular basis is AmericaShirts.com.
Yes, that's right. AmericaShirtsFirst.com, the most based t-shirts on the planet. And again, you can get 15% off any of these lovely and based t-shirts in that store by using the discount code Koolfrogg to save 15% on anything in the store. Again, the most based t-shirts on the planet. I'm not a doctor or a therapist or a lawyer. That's just what the website says. So, go check that out at AmericaShirtsFirst.com. And you can also check out my Rumble channel, where I post all kinds of lovely little things about Russia and Ukraine right now, and the truth about all that stuff that the left and the right will not tell you. Go check that out. It's America Shirts, spelled exactly as you see it on the screen there, capital A, capital S, all one word, and you type that into the Rumble, and you'll find it there. So go check that out as well.
Do it. Don't think about it. Don't question it. Just do it. That's what you should do. You should follow it, and then you should actually go to his website, and you should buy a T-shirt. And you can help me buy a T-shirt as well from him by actually going to buymeacoffee.com/Koolfrogg. That's KOOLFROGG. Right, and that's the fun one. Is the knowledge and insight of everybody that comes across my show. And you get a lot of it, and it's just a fun, good old time.
It is. Thank you to the great Magic Mike who joined us tonight, who again his internet gave out on him, and so that's why he's no longer with us, obviously, right here, because we just mentioned that. But yes,
otherwise sometimes known as Mike Hunt.
Oh yes,
very
at times maybe. That you say. He doesn't say. You say.
He said his last name was Hunt. Mike Hunt.
Anyways.
Otherwise, hit up that linktree/Koolfrogg. You can find all kinds of links, places that you can find me. I mean, Twitters and Getters and almost everywhere else, including Telegram. Telegram's almost maybe possibly the place to go as opposed to going to the Discord. Who knows? We'll see. Yep. All that being said.
And again, thank you to Mike for all that information. That was very thought through, and it was very informational. It was very interesting.
Very interesting show. Yes.
Very interesting, very educational, very enlightening. So perhaps
we'll have to have him back
something
again.
Right. So perhaps you may see that kind of an industry pop up in the United States at some point, or someplace else at some point. Albeit it probably be after a lot of the crazy crap that we're going through right now. But it'd be sometime in the future, like I don't know how long, but you know,
Right, different
but
versions
sometime
and variations of techniques that were shown tonight. You'd be surprised what the people are coming up with already. I would be surprised.
Yeah.
Wouldn't
so
be
there you go.
surprised. There's no way that we're the first ones to actually think about it. Such an application or whatever with plywood.
Oh, probably
or whatever.
not. I mean, Ian was talking about it, right? Ian was right. It's the title of the video.
Ian was right. You know,
Ian
so
from
I mean,
Timcast was right. Well, yep. So there you go. There you are, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you to Mike for showing us all that and talking about it. It was very
everybody
enlightening.
say goodbye.
Yep. Okay. Later, peeps.
Later.
I don't want to live on this planet anymore.